first, just to set the landscape, we have a real reading problem in our country. Only 1 out of 3 children reaches reading proficiency by 4th grade. And in some urban districts, it's actually a lot worse than that. But what's also important, I'm sure, to you parents out there is only 1 out of 10 children is actually an advanced reader. And advanced reading skills are really important for the 21st century economy. So what we all want, what the teachers want, what parents want, what everyone wants, is for kids to reach their potential. And about 98% of kids can learn to read. So learning to read is open to almost every child. What I want you to think about as you think about reading and your own reading ability, oftentimes when I'm in person, which I much prefer, by the way, when I'm in person, I do a little dialogue with people about, how many of you out there actually didn't have a great reading experience or didn't feel good about themselves as readers. And so many hands go up because a lot of people feel that way. They feel like they never really were taught how to read well and they never got that good at it. And the thing about learning to read is it's not a character flaw. It's solely an instructional problem. Kids who don't learn to read did not get the right instruction for them. And that's what you as a parent and all the teachers are trying to prevent. So just wanted to set the landscape. In our country, we have a reading problem, which is why so many of us are trying so hard to fix it. The real big thing that was sort of a kick in the jugular for me is that 92% of families believe their children read at grade level or above. That is a disconnect, right? So all these families have this idea in their heads that their kids are going along and doing quite well, when actually only 1 out of 3 children is reading proficiency. So, so you can see that there's a lot of magical thinking going on. And I have a whole bunch of theories about why that is, and I will tell you momentarily. But let's just start by thinking about what we think of when we're thinking about reading. Okay, that was a tongue twister. What do you think about when you think about a child learning to read? I would suggest that most people think of the letters and the sounds each letter makes, and having a child read an easy reader, one of those I can read books. When a family hears a child read one of those books, the bells start ringing and everyone's happy, as they should be. It is a really big day. That's what we think of when we think of reading. And that's not easy for a lot of kids, right? They need to be taught to read in a systematic way. It doesn't just come to them. It's not like learning to talk. Learning to read has to be taught. So the difference is that we think about reading and we're thinking about these letters and the sounds and these early readers. That's what kids need to read well early. But the problem we found as researchers and educators is that kids, even if they do read well or read well enough early, they don't always read well enough in the years to come. And they need to. But what it means is the way reading happens changes over time. And it really helps to know what a child has to do long-term to figure out what to do now. So here's our goal for this presentation, 3 goals. I want you to understand more about learning to read. And then I want you to know your role as a parent or caregiver and how you can set your child up to read well. And then finally, I want you to learn how to use Abound to have fun conversations and build these crucial skills in small moments in each day, but also to understand enough to help and collaborate with teachers on getting your child to proficiency and beyond. Now, this is all based on the research, okay? I'm not making any of this up. This is based on really well done research that I am happy to give to anyone who wants to learn more about it. I'm always excited when people go back to the science. The way I'm going to reach some of these goals is I'm going to show you one sentence from 3 different books. So this first book is called Zach's Alligator. And by the way, this is exactly the kind of information I gave to your teachers, because everyone needs to be on the same page. I didn't want teachers to not know what parents were being told, because really what works, the schools that work the best are working collaboratively. So we all need the same vocabulary and the same understanding. So here's the first sentence. If I were there, I would ask someone to read it, but I will do it myself. A big box came in the mail for Zach. This is from Zach's Alligator. You can see that those are all pretty easy words, right? They're words that are chosen to make it easy for a child to understand. None of those are words that he wouldn't have heard or she wouldn't have heard in the kitchen or out in the playground. Those are everyday words, right? So why is that? Why aren't there hard words in those easy books? Because we're trying to help kids really focus on reading the individual words, decoding the words. So if you look at that bolded word, we know there's a B at the beginning, an I, and that squiggly thing is a G. And a child needs to know that those 3 letters each have their own sound, B, I, G. Actually, I and G have more than one sound, right? Because G can make the J sound when it's next to an E or an I. But in this case, the sounds are B, I, G. And then a child has to blend those sounds together, big, big, and read the word. But it's not just reading that word, of course. They also have to read the rest of the words in that sentence and then make meaning of it in their head. So I want you to think about something. If you were reading this sentence and you really were struggling to decode the words, which is what happens at the beginning, right? Kids aren't going to immediately get it. They have to practice. Eyes to print, eyes to print, eyes to print. It's just like dribbling a basketball. You got to do it a lot to get fast at it. But if you're not fast, if you're slowly getting those words decoded, then you read it like this. Big box came. And then by the time you get to the end of reading that sentence, you have no idea what you read, right? You can't remember back to what you read at the beginning. And so you're not going to be able to make meaning of that sentence. That's the problem for kids who are what we call disfluent, who aren't fluently reading. They need to be able to automatically read the words so that they have room in their busy brains to make sense of them, right? That you can understand that, right? If you were so focusing on reading each word, it'd be really hard to put it all together in your head. So that's this first book, this first sentence in the first book. And let's just also talk about the fact that there's a picture here. The picture supports the learning for the child, but you can never have a child focus and count on pictures, right? Because in the books to come, there won't be pictures there to support them. So it helps at the beginning as they get to know what it takes to read well and as they start decoding words. But if a child read this sentence and said a big package came in the mail for Zach, you'd know he was over-relying on the pictures and not focusing on decoding the words. And remember, in these early readers, what we're trying to get children to do is get more automatic at word reading. So they are easy words to know, like they're in their vocabulary already. And then they have to just focus on decoding and eventually making meaning too. Okay, here is the next sentence. And let me tell you, it is a long way from Zach's Alligator. This was from a summer reading book. It's called Interpreter of Maladies. It was for a high school 10th grade summer read. He looked at her face, which, it occurred to him, had not grown out of its girlhood, the eyes untroubled, the pleasing features unfirm, as if they still had to settle into some sort of permanent expression. Now that is quite a sentence. Look at all those commas, all those ideas you have to keep in your head while you're trying to read, right? If you just read the words, chances are you wouldn't be able to put it all together, right? It's not just about reading the words. You have to read and understand all those words and put all those ideas together. And that is hard. There's a lot of complexity, very long sentence, complex words. I want to call your attention to a few of the affixes, which are like the prefixes and suffixes that are in this sentence. Girlhood, like if a child only knows hood in terms of like what's on top of your jacket, girlhood might really confuse them. But if they knew livelihood, girlhood, personhood, adulthood, because they'd been exposed to that suffix, then they'd be able to take on that word and understand it better. Understand that it's like that period of time when they were a girl. If a child knew that UN meant not, then untroubled would be clearly not troubled, and unfirm would be clearly not firm. So what we try to do, what your teachers are trying to do, and what we're trying to talk to kids about is understanding language, getting excited about words and language. And that's because they have to know a lot of words and language to make their way successfully through the books that they will someday encounter. So what we see from reading this one sentence is just knowing how to read the individual words isn't enough. They need more than that. They need to know a lot of meanings of words and a lot of meanings of word parts. And also they have to have the attention and the persistence to actually just stay at that very long sentence, right? Okay, let's go to the next one. This is from an AP history book. This is my last sentence I'm going to share with you. The evidence does not justify an interpretation of the revolution in Massachusetts as an internal class conflict designed to achieve additional political, economic, and social democracy. So when you look at that sentence, those aren't the words we use when we talk. Those are words, and that is language. That's the language of school and books, in the older grades especially. And for kids, it's really, truly almost like a different language altogether. And when you and I jump into this text, we say to ourselves, ooh, wow, I'm going to have to really put my thinking cap on. I'm going to have to really focus. I'm going to have to pay attention to the words. I'm going to have to focus enough so that I'm reading and I'm making that movie in my head about what I'm reading, putting it all together and trying to figure it out. That's a big job, right? You have to be able to read the words, but you have to be able to do so much more because the language is so different in later texts. And it starts to be different in about grade 4. And it just gets considerably different. You know how you feel when you open a textbook for 10th grade biology. Wow. Okay, so that's what we have to think about, unfortunately, when we think about kids and reading. Of course, they have to know k, at, cat, but it's not just that C-A-T spells cat. It's not enough to just know how to spell words. There are 3 types of skills children need to master to become strong readers. And so what our job is as teachers and parents and after-school providers and paraprofessionals, and, you know, I used to do it when I coached soccer. all the time what we want to be doing for kids in playful, fun, but intentional ways is filling these buckets so they're able to read well. That's our gift to them. So this first bucket is the 26 letters, uppercase and lowercase in English, and the 44 sounds that those letters or letter combinations make. So of course, CH makes the ch sound, right? But C makes the k sound and H makes the h sound, right? But C also makes the s sound. English isn't that easy. So it's not just 26 letters and then we have 26 sounds. That would be easy. That's a transparent language. Spanish is that way. But this is different. English is different. Kids need to know the 26 letters, uppercase and lowercase, and the 44 sounds that those letters or letter combinations make. And then they have to be able to read the words fluently, as I said before, so that they can read them fast enough so that they can put the whole sentence together in their head and make meaning. That's bucket we call letters and sounds. And let me just call your attention to something. This bucket could have a cap on it. There's just 26 letters. There's just 44 sounds. Kids can actually learn those letters and sounds with the right instruction in a relatively short amount of time, because it's what we call a discrete amount of skills, right? There's a limit to it. These other buckets, that's not the case. So in this one, there is so much in this bucket. We're all still adding to our bucket of these skills. It's all the vocabulary you need. When kids graduate, they have about 15,000 words in their personal lexicons. They're like dictionaries in their head. They have to have a real lot of vocabulary to read and understand these books. They also have to understand language, just like that HOOD, hood suffix, and the UN prefix I was talking to you about. When kids understand the parts of words, it opens up their vocabulary exponentially, because not only do you know the word do, you know undo and redo, right? So that's why we teach them word parts, because they have meaning. It's called morphology. You don't need to know that, but it's a good new vocabulary word for you. And then the other thing that is in this bucket of skills is background knowledge. Kids need to know a lot of things about the world. So when you're out looking at leaves, or you're looking at the ocean, or you're picking up shells or sticks, or you're doing anything where you're talking to a child about something, your job is to see it and expand on it. You don't just say, yeah, that's a shell. You say, huh, that shell looks really different from this shell. That's really interesting. I wonder why, what the animals were like how they use these shells. Or you're just talking, you're just getting them thinking, compare and contrast. You're building their knowledge. Now, suddenly, the shells aren't flat to them. Suddenly, shells are all sorts of different kinds. Every time you do that, you're building background knowledge for kids. And that's really important. Very interesting study was done about with two different types of readers. One was a really good reader who could read words really fluently, a group of those kids. And then another group were kids who couldn't read words all that fluently. The group of really good readers knew nothing about soccer. The group, actually, I think it was baseball. Yeah, this research was with baseball. They knew nothing about baseball. The group of not that great readers actually knew a lot about baseball. And in the end, the kids who could take more meaning from this text that they had just read about baseball were the kids who had more background knowledge, even though they couldn't read as fluently. That's because what you bring to a text helps you take more from the text. So if I open a book on organic chemistry, trust me, it's a blank slate for me. I know almost nothing about organic chemistry. I am not going to get as much from that book as someone who knows something about organic chemistry. But the same thing is true about things that we consider little subjects, like trees or plants or, I don't know, types of meat, anything, any subject that gives kids more information to think about builds this bucket of skills and prepares them to be better readers. We call this bucket vocabulary and knowledge. Finally, this third bucket are skills that you might not think of as skills that kids need to read, but they are all the social and emotional skills that kids need to take in all the learning and read well. So it's persistence when reading something difficult, like those 2 one-sentence examples I gave you. You needed to really persist if that was, you needed to really persist if that was something that you were reading, right? Because that was hard. You also need attention. You need to be able to pay attention. You can't be distracted when other people are, making noise in the room or whatever. And then you also need empathy. And that sounds so strange. Like, why do you need empathy to read a book? Well, you can't take the perspective of a character if you can't take the perspective of your friend or your sister or the boy sitting across from you at the table in class, right? You have to be able to feel how they're feeling to take their perspective. So it's funny, when I'm walking with my mom, she's 90 and we walk together often. And when I'm walking with her, sometimes coming down the sidewalk will be a family, the little boy's on the bike and the dad is pushing the stroller with a baby in it. And sometimes what happens is my mother and I step off the sidewalk and the family goes by without any words exchanged. But sometimes the dad says out loud, "Hey, Tony, did you thank that woman? Those women who just stepped off the sidewalk? That was really good of them, huh? They made it possible for you to go through. Thanks so much." Right? That is a teachable moment. That teaches empathy. That teaches awareness of other people. And believe it or not, those types of skills are really important to reading well. And then regulating your body, being able to sit, pay attention, and all those types of skills are also really important. And we call this bucket awareness and regulation. So where are these skills taught? Letters and sounds is actually mostly taught at school. It doesn't mean that as a parent, you don't talk about the alphabet or have those letters on the refrigerator or play games or read books and talk about letters and sounds. Those are all important things to do. You come to a stop sign, you say S-T-O-P, S-T-O-P spells stop. I hear the S sound at the beginning and the P sound at the end, stop. Hey, P, Uncle Pete's name begins with a P sound too. Now you're not saying to them, okay, write the letter P, tell me exactly what the sound makes. You're just talking. You're just filling their airspace with conversation on occasion about letters and sounds. But that's not going to do it. In order to be taught these skills well, they have to be taught systematically at school, from at least kindergarten through grade 2, often pre-K through grade 3. And with the right instruction and a trained teacher and the right materials, these skills can typically be taught relatively quickly. Now, not all children are going to get them as quickly as all other children. That's okay. All they need is more intensive instruction, more appropriate instruction for them. And that's what your teachers are there for. because these skills have to become automatic for kids. They're foundational to reading. They're absolutely essential. Unfortunately, they're not sufficient. If that's all we needed to do, all we'd say to teachers is teach kids the 26 letters and 44 sounds and how to read words fluently, and they'll be all set. But as we know from looking at those upper school texts, that's not enough. The other two buckets of skills, the ones that I said aren't discrete sets of skills. There's so many things that have to be stuffed into those buckets. Drip, drip, drip every day over time. They have to build throughout a child's life 24/7. When they're first being talked to and related to and getting, loved and cared for and learning how to regulate their bodies and minds, when they're being read to, when games are being played, when you're at the grocery store and talking to them, teaching them new vocabulary words, comparing the tomatoes in a can to the tomatoes that are on your counter at home. Wow, that's funny. I see tomatoes in this can. How do you think they fit those tomatoes in this can? Next time we open a can of tomatoes, let's look at them and see if they look like the tomato that we have on that counter. Whenever you're doing that for kids, you're building the vocabulary and knowledge. You're building their awareness and regulation skills all the time too. And that's what gets them prepared to read well in the years ahead. So just to recap, kids need those letters and sound skills that are mostly taught at school systematically, but they also need vocabulary and knowledge, lots of it, and awareness and regulation, drip, 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 over time. Over time. It's all about accumulation. And I always say when I come to this slide, if you remember nothing else from this talk, please remember that word, accumulate, build up. Just like, I live outside of Boston, so the snowball makes so much sense for me. When you're making a big snowman, you start with a little ball and you put a little bit more and a little bit more and you pack it all in there, and the snowball gets bigger and bigger and bigger as you accumulate the snow. And that's what has to happen with those buckets of skills in small moments every day through the years. So what I ask you to do when you're thinking about your child's reading skills is to celebrate the early skills and all that really that excitement of learning to read words, but think long-term in the back of your mind, because it's a numbers game in the end. Children are only in schools 13% of their awake time. And we just discovered that the skills they're going to need to read these upper school books are plentiful. There's a lot of them, right? They have to accumulate over time. Teachers can't do it alone. I just wrote an article about this. We have set up the teacher-parent relationship to make it seem like the teacher has to hold all the burden of teaching entirely, noticing the problems and doing all the teaching. When actually, even if the teacher were absolutely perfect, had complete control of a classroom and nothing else going on in her life, they're only in school a small percentage of their time, these kids. We need to help. It's a collaborative, collective effort to raise strong readers. And the sooner we do this, that's why I tip my hat to MEUSD. They are all in on understanding this problem and encouraging families to engage in ways that are realistic, doable, and fun. And most importantly, they will build up the skills that are so important for kids. So, as I said, schools can't do this skill building job alone. You have a really critical role to play. What I want to talk about now, hopefully that's all been, what I just explained is clear to you, and it will resonate what the Abound app is all about, because what we're trying to do is address the problems that are out there around children's reading. So when I left Harvard, I did it to try to figure out a way to give parents an easy way to build these skills that are so important, but also an easy way to recognize where your child is on the road to reading well, to understand some key benchmarks, so that if you're noticing something, you can say to your teacher, you know, I'm a little concerned about this. What do you think about this? And together, you can talk about the road forward. You know, in this article, I was writing about my own child who had was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at the age of 14. The only reason why he was diagnosed and didn't get, didn't die from it, actually, because you can die from that disease if it's not taken seriously, if the medications aren't given to you, if they don't get insulin, was because I noticed he was thirsty. I happened to notice it. Everyone else thought I was crazy, but I noticed it was weird. So I called the doctor and I talked to the doctor, and the doctor said to me, yeah, that does sound a little odd. Why don't you bring him in? I noticed the doctor, the professional, and I had a conversation. We brought him in. He took over from there, but at least my noticing made a difference. And that's what you want to be able to do for your kids, so you can collaborate with your teachers. So the Abound app has both a daily a daily drip, drip, drip to be doing to fill those skill buckets for all kids from age 3 to grade 3. And then it has this benchmark check-in, but I'm going to tell you all about it. All right. The app is designed around 2-week themes. So, and the reason we do that is to build up knowledge, because remember, we're trying to fill that bucket that's vocabulary and knowledge, and that means kids need to know something about a lot of different things. So we organize it around 2-week themes. And the Abound app has 3 main features. So this is what it looks like when you first open it. And the 3 circles at the bottom are the 3 main features. And you'll get new information in 2 of them every day. So the big one, you can tell which screen is up because the circle is the biggest. And this one is what we call Talk On. And it's 1 question a day about the theme. And it also relates to a specific skill, which you can see on this screen is vocabulary and knowledge, V and K. So it's 1 skill-based question per day. There's no right or wrong answers to these. You might not know the answer. That's actually a really good thing, because then you and your child can go back and forth and think about and talk about and wonder about what it's all about, what this question, how you would answer the question. There's not a specific answer, but you would have your own answer to it, of course. So in this case, it says, would you want the latest bicycle invention, one that has an electric motor? Or would you prefer to use your own muscle power to propel your bike? Who would need an electric bicycle the most? So now you're talking about, whether you use your bike for exercise or you use your bike for transportation to get to work, say. You're talking about delivery drivers who ride bikes to bring food through the city, maybe. So this question should be a conversation, should spark a conversation between you and your child that goes back and forth. That's called Talk On. And the whole idea is you're talking with children, not just to them. But the other 2 features here are Word Up, which I'll tell you a little bit more about, and Book Out, which I'll also go into further. I also want to call your attention to the menu at the top, because that's where you get the benchmark check-in. It's also where, if you're from a Spanish-speaking family, you can get the Spanish version of the app right there in the menu under your profile. But it also has some other fun features that you can just investigate. Okay, so just one more time, the talk on screen is one question per day. It's going to get you to connect with your child and to teach them through these back and forth conversations. But I want you to think of it as just a conversation, not as you being the teacher, them being the kid, right? Because kids see through that. They sniff it out a million miles away. You just want to have a fun conversation. You're giving them information in this question, and then you're asking them to apply it to their lives. Remember this, they care about what you care about. So if you say, I just read this question that I've been thinking about. What do you think about this? And then you start the conversation. If you get another adult in the room to jump in, if grandparents are great. If they're nearby, they love to talk. If there are other children in the house, they might want to weigh in. It's supposed to build the kind of conversation that goes back and forth, serve and return. That's how kids learn. In Spanish, I'll just show you quickly, you would see the question in Spanish. You'd also see the English version of the same question, the translation. And then up above, you see that audio link. That's to help, that's an audio talk of the question. So basically reading of the question, you can just access it right there. And the EN shows you the screen on the right, the English version of that same question. Just for the record, on the Spanish front, we have a whole nother one of these training programs in Spanish. So if you know anyone who's a Spanish speaker, please encourage them to get the link from their teacher, their child's teacher. Okay, so this is the second question of the day. It's called Word Up. And we do this question specifically to teach a child about a complex word, because these words that they're going to be having to read in the upper school text are hard. And those are the kinds of word that takes lots of practice. And so we expose them to the same word for a week. Sometimes when I talk to parents, and actually a lot of the after school staff that use Abound, they say, oh, I actually don't feel great about this. I don't know this word this well. And I always say to them, great, now you can both learn about it together. When kids see that you're interested in word learning, they get interested in word learning too. And did you know that being word aware, word conscious, interested in words actually helps children read better? So every day you're going to talk about one word. And if you can't identify the word yourself, you can listen to the whole question asked by just pushing that audio link. So it's the same word with different questions every day. In this case, the word was approach. Today, as I look, the word is priority, and the theme is down on the farm. So it says, a priority is something important that needs to be done before other things that aren't as important. Animals need to have their stalls cleaned every day so there aren't any germs and they don't get sick. Is cleaning a priority for you? Why or why not? Now that's a good question, you have to admit. That'll get you talking, laughing. I'm sure they're not going to say yes, but who knows? Maybe you're better at training your kids to have to make cleaning a priority than I was. Anyway, Word Up, that's the second question of the day. The third feature from these circles is called Book Out, and we give 2 book titles suggested per week. And as I was talking to Kelly before this program started, she was on early. Sometimes people have trouble with their own vision, or they have trouble finding books. So what we did was we made every one of these books available on YouTube. So we chose books that are publicly available on YouTube. So you can just hit the link. When you do hit the link, you're going to see some information about the book. You're going to see a couple of questions you can ask. about the book to get your child talking, some more words you can talk about. They're not the kinds of words you need a whole week to talk about, but they're just some more fun words that you can discuss with your kids. And remember, you want them to be word learners. You just say to them every day, wow, you really love words, don't you? You're really a great word learner. Brainwashing totally works. Anyway, but all you have to do is hit that speaker icon and you'll be able to go ahead and hear the book and see the book read on YouTube. I encourage you to not just give the phone to your child to do it. Sit down with them and talk about the book. That's where the learning happens. It's through talk. And by the way, we do have an opportunity for purchasing the books, but we don't make any money on that. We just did it because people wanted that, and so we gave it to them. All right. The final thing I want to tell you about before we talk about troubleshooting is the benchmark check-in. This you can access from the menu, and it's going to help you understand what your child should be working on. We ask you to take the check-in probably 2 times a year. And it's not judging. You have to remember, this is a can-do positive thing we're trying to encourage. It's not every benchmark. There are thousands of benchmarks that teachers have to teach over the year in all the different subjects, but they're key benchmarks to give you an understanding for the kinds of things your child should be working on. Remember, these are what they're supposed to be working on right now. So if they don't have the skills yet, that's okay. They're supposed to be working on it right now. It's not, has he accomplished these particular skills? It's, is he working on them? You might not know, you might think so, you might not be sure. What we encourage you to do actually is send your results, the top corner, that little V thing or sideways V or less than sign that's at the top. That's actually a way for you to share your results with your child's teacher before the conference. And that way the teacher will see what you're seeing at home. And chances are she'll say, oh, no, I'm not seeing it that way. Or, oh, I hadn't noticed that before. Because it's a collective exercise to raise a strong reader. And of course, your teacher's going to want to know what you noticed, because there's a lot of kids in the class and maybe she missed something, you know, not her fault, lots going on. Teachers are tireless workers. Your teachers are very impressive. So if they've missed something, all you're trying to do is help move your child forward. So this benchmark check-in is a really good communication tool between parents and teachers. Okay, so just to summarize, daily, there's 2 questions to start back and forth conversations. One of them was those circles that was talk on, and one was word up. And the word up, of course, is the word of the week. Weekly, you're going to get 2 books that you could read together. And you know what? Read them a few times, talk about them, use the Abound questions or just talk about them on your own. But it gives you an opportunity to give your child an experience hearing the language of text. They have to hear a lot of language of text to become familiar with it. So just reading what they can read on their own isn't giving them that language of text in their head. Do you know what I mean? And then twice a year, you'll take the check-in. One of the things that I wanted to call your attention to is that it is in English or Spanish, and that weekly you'll get a newsletter with extra questions to talk about that'll come through your school. All right, so at this point now, you've heard more than you probably wanted to hear from me. And I've gone further than I wanted, longer than I wanted to go. And I'm sorry about that. I'm not quite sure why I went on so long, but I must have been enthusiastic.